It's a quiet night, the kind of silence where every sound feels louder than it should be. Jamal, a 16-year-old black teen, walks home from basketball practice. The only company he has is his hoodie, pulled tight over his head to shield him from the cold and the beat of his music pumping through his earphones. His hands casually dribble his basketball as he walks, rhythmically bouncing it against the pavement with ease. He's tired. The kind of tired that makes every step feel like a little extra weight on his legs. But it's a good tired, the feeling after a long practice, after pushing himself harder than ever before. His mind is replaying his game-winning shot from earlier, a smile creeping onto his face despite the exhaustion. The street around him is empty. The dim glow of the streetlights cast long, lonely shadows on the cracked sidewalk. Every now and then a car passes by, headlights cutting through the darkness. It's peaceful, almost too peaceful for a busy city like this. Then, out of nowhere, the screeching sound of tires breaks through the calm. A police car comes to a halt in front of him, its flashing red and blue lights lighting up the street like a strobe light. Jamal stops, his heart suddenly pounding. The bass from his music fades into the background as he pulls his earphones out, confused. What's going on? Why is the cop stopping me? The door to the police car slams open with a sharp sound. A white officer, Officer Ryan, steps out. His face is cold, eyes narrowed as he sizes up Jamal. Hand already on his gun, he doesn't look like he's ready to start a conversation. "Hey!" The officer's voice is loud and demanding, cutting through the night air like a knife. "What are you doing out here?" Jamal blinks, trying to process. "I'm just walking home, sir." His voice is confused but respectful. He's been stopped by cops before, but never like this. He didn't do anything wrong. But the officer's not listening. His eyes narrow, the tension between them thickening by the second. Without a word, Ryan steps forward, grabbing Jamal's arm roughly and shoving him against the side of the police car. Jamal flinches, a surge of panic rising in his chest. "Wait, what's going on? What did I do?" he stammers, trying to pull away. His heart's racing now, adrenaline kicking in. The officer doesn't answer. Instead, he's already slapping the cuffs on Jamal's wrists with a practiced hand. Jamal tries to explain himself again, his voice shaking. I'm just walking home from practice. Please, what did I do?" But it's no use. Ryan ignores him, already calling for backup over his radio, his voice stern. "I've got one here. Young black male. Suspicious activity." The words stun Jamal. Suspicious, what? But before he can finish, a few bystanders start to gather, their phones coming out, recording every moment. Some seem unsure, others just watch, almost frozen. A man in the crowd mutters to his friend, "This ain't right. What's he doing wrong?" Another woman's face shows sympathy. Why is he getting arrested? He's just a kid. But Jamal can't focus on them right now. All he can think about is the weight of the cuffs on his wrists and the officer's hard grip on his shoulder. The panic sets in. Is this really happening? He struggles slightly, his chest tightening. "I didn't do anything. Why are you doing this?" But the more he talks, the more Ryan ignores him. Jamal's words fall on deaf ears. The officer steps back, his posture stiff. As the backup car pulls up, Jamal feels the eyes of everyone on him. Shame floods his system. Why is this happening? Why is he being treated like this? As the backup police car screeches to a stop, Jamal's heart is still pounding in his chest. His body feels stiff with fear, the cuffs digging into his wrists. He's scared, confused. This isn't how he thought his night would end. He looks around, searching for any hint of help, but the faces of the bystanders are unfamiliar. No one is stepping forward. Then he hears it. A voice, a firm, confident voice, cutting through the rising tension. What's going on here? Jamal's heart skips a beat. He knows that voice. It's his father. David Carter, a tall, well-dressed black man in a sharp suit, strides towards the scene with the air of someone who commands attention. His steps are calm, steady, but there's an undeniable authority in the way he carries himself. His face is set in a hard expression, but there's no panic in his eyes. He's a man used to fighting for justice and winning. The crowd begins to react. Whispers ripple through the bystanders. Some exchange relieved glances, while others seem more hopeful now that someone has arrived. A few people murmur to one another, "That's David Carter, the lawyer." Jamal's eyes are wide. Relief and fear flood him all at once. His dad is here. Maybe now he won't be treated like this. But there's still that sinking feeling in his gut. What if it's too late? Officer Ryan turned sharply at the sound of David's voice, his face twisting into a brief look of annoyance. "What's this? Another angry parent?" Ryan sneers, his voice dripping with sarcasm. David doesn't flinch. He steps up to Ryan, his eyes narrowing in calm fury. "Why is my son being arrested?" Ryan tries to brush him off. "Just doing my job," he mutters, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. His hand tightens around the baton at his side, but there's a visible shift in his posture. He's nervous. The confidence he had before is slipping. David doesn't back down. He stands firm, his gaze unwavering. "He hasn't done anything wrong. Why are you arresting him? Was he carrying a weapon?" "No." "Did you find stolen goods?" "No." "Then what's the reason?" Ryan shifts uncomfortably, his mouth opening and closing as he struggles to come up with an answer. He's already digging himself into a hole, and he knows it. He was acting suspicious. We've had reports of a robbery in this area. David cuts him off, his voice growing more pointed. "Suspicious? What's suspicious about walking home from basketball practice in the middle of the night? You're harassing him because of how he looks." The words hit hard, and the crowd grows silent, sensing the shift in power. As the tension between father and officer rises, Ryan's partner, a young black officer, steps forward. His expression is torn, uncertain. He hesitates for a moment before speaking up. "Ryan, you can't do this." His voice is quiet but firm. "You can't just target kids like him. You've been doing this for years." Ryan glares at him, taken aback. "What are you talking about?" But the young officer doesn't back down. "I'm talking about the way you treat people, the way you treat kids like Jamal. You're making a mistake." The words hang in the air. Ryan's face darkens. He steps back, his hands shaking. He opens his mouth to speak, but doesn't. He's suddenly very aware of the cameras trained on him and the growing number of witnesses. Then it happens. Ryan's partner looks at David again, his eyes widening. "Wait. Is that Attorney Carter?" He says it quietly at first, almost to himself. Ryan freezes, the realization hitting him like a ton of bricks. His whole demeanor changes. The confident, almost ruthless cop who had been treating Jamal like a criminal now looks more like a deer caught in headlights. He looks nervously around, sensing the shift in power. David's reputation is well known in the community, especially among law enforcement. He's a powerful civil rights lawyer who's been responsible for countless cases that have exposed racial discrimination within the police force. Ryan knows he's made a huge mistake. The air is thick with tension as Ryan shifts uncomfortably on his feet. The smirk that had once been plastered on his face fades. His voice falters as he mutters under his breath. I was just doing my job." But now it's too late. His partner is already looking at him with a mixture of disappointment and disgust, and the onlookers, including Jamal, can feel the weight of the moment. The tension in the air is palpable. Jamal stands frozen, his hands still cuffed behind him. His eyes flicker back and forth between his father and the officer. He watches in awe as David takes control of the situation, the calm in his father's voice like an anchor in the storm. David steps closer to Officer Ryan, his posture tall and unwavering. His voice is steady, but it cuts through the night air with precision. "I want to know why my son is being arrested?" David's words are firm, but there's no rage in his tone, just a quiet, measured authority. Ryan shifts uncomfortably on his feet, trying to maintain a semblance of control. "He was acting suspicious," Ryan mutters, his voice rising with defensiveness. "We had a report of a robbery in the area and—" David raises a hand, cutting him off smoothly. "Suspicious? Because he's walking home in a hoodie? Let me remind you, there are no laws against wearing a hoodie. Was he carrying a weapon? Did you find any stolen goods on him?" Ryan stammers, his words growing less certain. I was just doing my job. You don't understand. I'm just trying to keep the streets safe. People like him." David steps forward, his presence towering over Ryan, and for a moment the cop looks like he might shrink. The audience can see the shift. The power dynamic has already started to tilt. David's calm authority stands in stark contrast to Ryan's flustered defensiveness. "People like him? What exactly are you implying, officer?" David's words hang in the air, dripping with disbelief. Ryan tries to recover, but his voice shakes. "Look, I don't have time for this. I'm just doing my job, okay?" David's eyes narrow, a look of disgust flashing across his face. He pulls out his phone, his fingers pressing the screen with deliberate force. His voice remains steady, but it carries a quiet power that demands respect. "I'm calling the police chief right now." The sudden mention of the chief causes Ryan's expression to falter. He knows who David is. David Carter isn't just some lawyer. He's a high-profile civil rights attorney, a man who's taken down corrupt officers before. Ryan can feel the weight of his mistake bearing down on him. Ryan's partner, standing slightly to the side, watches the exchange with growing unease. He shifts on his feet, his eyes darting between David and Ryan. He's clearly uncomfortable with the entire situation, but doesn't say a word. David's voice is clear and commanding as he dials. "Chief Thompson, David Carter here. We need to have a conversation about this officer's actions." On the other end of the line, there's a pause before the voice of the police chief picks up. "Carter?" The voice sounds almost surprised, but it quickly turns to a more respectful tone. "What's the situation?" David doesn't waste time. "My son is being detained without cause. Officer Ryan here has no reasonable explanation for his actions. I expect this to be dealt with immediately." His voice never wavers, and the authority in it is undeniable. The chief knows David isn't someone who makes idle threats. This isn't just a lawyer making a phone call. It's a public figure demanding accountability. Ryan's face turns pale as he hears the chief's voice on the phone, his entire posture slumping in defeat. He knows this situation is about to spiral out of control. David continues speaking, his voice still firm. "I'll be waiting for your call." And with that, he hangs up. There's a tense silence. The only sound is the faint hum of the streetlights above. Ryan stands frozen, his hands balled into fists, as his partner looks at him with a mixture of sympathy and disappointment. David glances at Jamal, his expression softening for a brief moment before he turns back to Ryan. The officer stands there, trying to salvage his pride, but it's clear that he's lost. The balance of power has shifted. David has turned the tables, and it's no longer just a matter of a father defending his son. It's about a man who knows how to navigate the system, and right now, Ryan is on the wrong side of it. David addresses the crowd, his voice projecting with calm confidence. Did anyone see what happened here? He's not just asking for the truth for Jamal's sake, he's gathering the witnesses to show that this officer's actions were unjust, unfair, and likely illegal. A few people from the crowd who had been silently recording start to speak up. One by one, they offer their accounts, some hesitant, others more confident. They describe how Jamal was just walking home, how he was treated like a criminal without any reason. It's clear that the public perception is shifting in Jamal's favor. The contrast couldn't be clearer. While David stays calm and collected, pressing Ryan for answers, the officer grows increasingly defensive, trying to justify his actions, but failing to provide any real reason for what he did. The tension continues to build as Officer Ryan grows increasingly agitated. His hands tremble slightly as he grips his baton, but he tries to hold it together, maintaining an appearance of authority. The crowd watches quietly, but their discomfort is palpable. Ryan's frustration is starting to boil over. He paces back and forth, his eyes darting nervously between David and the growing group of bystanders. Sweat beads on his forehead. He tries to cling to his previous confidence, but the weight of the situation is pressing down on him. Every time someone speaks, every time David asks another question, Ryan's control slips further. His jaw clenches as he grits his teeth, his voice getting shakier with every word. The young officer, Officer Jamal's peer, watches the scene unfold. He stands a few feet away, his eyes wide with uncertainty. He shifts from foot to foot, looking at Ryan, then the crowd, then back to his partner. His hands are clenched at his sides, and for a moment he doesn't move. It's clear he's torn. Does he stay silent and keep his job, or does he speak up and risk everything? As Ryan continues to spiral into frustration, the young officer takes a deep breath. He steps forward, his voice barely audible at first, but growing louder as he speaks. "This has to stop." His words cut through the tension, and all eyes turn toward him. Ryan immediately stops pacing, a look of disbelief crossing his face. His eyes narrow, anger flashing. "What the hell are you talking about?" Ryan snaps, his voice thick with rage. The young officer's voice shakes at first, but then it steadies. "You can't keep doing this, targeting kids like him for no reason. You're part of the problem." The crowd gasps. Some look at each other in disbelief, while others murmur their support. The young officer's words have struck a chord, and it's clear he's not backing down. Ryan's face turns red with fury. He's tried to hold his composure, but this is the breaking point. His voice rises in anger, his frustration spilling over in an ugly, unfiltered outburst. "Guys like him, they grow up to be criminals. I was just stopping a future thug." His voice cracks with frustration, his eyes wild. The words hang in the air, the sheer racism in them cutting through the tension like a knife. For a few heart-stopping seconds, silence falls over the scene. Everyone is frozen. Even Ryan's partner steps back slightly, his face pale with disgust at what he's just heard. The crowd is stunned, their eyes wide. Some shake their heads, others glance at each other in disbelief. David's face darkens with disgust, his eyes never leaving Ryan. The camera lingers on Ryan's face, his breath heavy, his eyes wide with realization. It's clear he didn't expect this moment. His outburst, the truth of what he believes, is now out in the open for all to see. The young officer stands there, his gaze unwavering, watching as Ryan's own words slowly unravel the officer's credibility, his authority, his control. There's a shift in the air. The power has completely moved away from Ryan. He's been exposed. The camera pulls back to show the crowd's reactions. Some shake their heads, some turn their backs, while others stand silently, feeling the weight of what's just been said. There's a deep sense of discomfort in the air. This moment has shattered the illusion that Ryan is simply a good cop doing his job. Now everyone knows the truth. The tension starts to fade as Jamal is uncuffed, but the weight of everything that's happened still lingers in the air. He stands there for a moment, his hands shaking slightly as he rubs his wrists. He looks around at the people who watch the ordeal unfold, their eyes full of sympathy and curiosity. But inside, Jamal feels a mix of relief and confusion. He's free for now, but the battle isn't over. As he walks toward his father, there's a slight hesitation in his steps, like he's unsure how to process the situation. His eyes are tired, and the fear from moments ago still hangs on his face. Jamal's inner conflict is clear. He's relieved that his father is there, but the world still feels heavy. He's been through this before, and he knows this isn't the last time he'll face injustice. There's a quiet sadness in his expression, a deep knowing that this battle is far from over. David, on the other hand, is far more outwardly composed, but the exhaustion is evident on his face. The weight of this fight has taken a toll on him. His son's safety, the systemic problems, the constant fight for justice, it's all weighing heavily on his shoulders. David's expression is one of frustration and anger, but also a deep, resigned determination. As a father, this situation hits him harder than any legal battle ever could. He takes a deep breath and walks toward Jamal, placing a firm hand on his son's shoulder. He gives a small, reassuring smile, but there's no denying the emotion in his eyes. It's a rare moment of vulnerability for a man who's used to fighting for others, but right now, it's all for his son. David steps aside to make a quick phone call to the police chief. The scene focuses on his voice, calm but firm, as he demands action. We hear the other end of the line murmur in resistance. Police chief, we've already investigated this incident. No need to make a scene. David, a scene? You're talking about my son. If you think this ends here, you're mistaken. You will address this, or I will bring it to the public. His tone is ice cold, cutting through any pushback the chief tries to give. There's no question that David's authority is unquestionable. Meanwhile, Ryan, sitting in his car, watches the scene unfold. His body is still tense, but now there's something more, an unmistakable flicker of doubt in his eyes. He stares ahead, seemingly lost in thought. His hands grip the steering wheel a little too tightly, as if trying to hold on to something he's not even sure he believes in anymore. The camera lingers on Ryan's face, and for the first time, there's a hint of regret. Maybe, just maybe, he's starting to realize the ugliness of his actions. The reflection of the streetlights on his face only adds to the sense of isolation. He's left with the consequences of his choices. Back with David and Jamal, the mood is quiet. Jamal looks up at his father, his voice soft. Jamal, Dad, will this ever stop happening? Will people like him ever understand? David sighs, his shoulders slumping slightly as he takes a moment to compose himself. He looks at his son with a sad smile, the weight of his words heavy in the air. David, not unless we keep fighting, Jamal. We have to show them. We have to keep showing them that what's happening is wrong. We don't stop just because it's hard. We don't stop until it changes. David's words are filled with resolve, but there's also an understanding of the long road ahead. This moment is not the end of their fight. It's just one battle in a much bigger war. But hope remains in David's eyes as he places a hand on Jamal's back, guiding him toward the car. As they walk away, the camera lingers on Ryan's face, still unsure, still wrestling with the reality of his own beliefs. The car slowly pulls away, and we see Jamal and David walking side by side, a symbol of strength and solidarity, their figures slowly disappearing into the night.